Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
Are there ways that we don't have to link somebody to an individual prescriber?
BC's top doctor says it's time to make it easier for people to get a safer supply of drugs amid the deadly drug crisis. The province says no.
Those are all non-starters.
Plus, tragedy on our roads. 16 people have been killed in crashes across BC in the past week. And
any new start has the potential to be a challenge for our province, and we need to get on them quick and get them out fast.
BC calls in reinforcements amid a surge in new wildfires.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. BC's medical health officer is calling for a major shift in the province's safer drug supply program. Dr. Bonnie Henry says people ought to be able to get opioids like hydromorphone without a prescription. But as Katie DeRosa reports, the BC government has quickly rejected that advice.
Those are all non-starters. We're not going to go down a path that separates people from healthcare.
That's Addictions Minister Jennifer Whiteside rejecting the recommendation from BC's public health officer that the government explore the use of compassion clubs or even retail stores to distribute hard drugs. Dr. Bonnie Henry's latest report on BC's Safe Supply program envisions a system where people no longer have to go to a pharmacist to access opioids like hydromorphone. Henry says there are too many barriers that prevent people from accessing safer supply drugs, and as a result, they turn to toxic and potentially lethal street drugs.
So we have to take evidence from other types of initiatives, for example, related to cannabis use in the past.
Critics say Henry's proposal would make hard drugs like heroin, cocaine, and methamphetamine as easy to get as cannabis.
One of the scenarios that they're proposing is that illicit drugs, find their way onto shelves, store shelves, be accessible to people through retailers, which I think is not only irresponsible, but frankly, I think it's dangerous.
Earlier this year, Premier David Eby recriminalized the use of hard drugs in public spaces, putting him at odds with Dr. Henry, who has long advocated for drug decriminalization. Henry's report says an example of a non-prescription model is the now shuttered Opioid Compassion Club operated by the Drug User Liberation Front, or DULF. DULF was shut down in October, and its co-founders were arrested and charged with possession for the purpose of trafficking. The province's Safe Supply program has come under fire recently, with Sturco and federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre calling prescription opioids government-supplied addictive drugs. University of Victoria researcher Bernie Pauly, who contributed to Henry's report, said urgent action is needed to stop people from using toxic street drugs, which are killing an average of 7 people a day.
People are dying now. And if we don't do something, we will be culpable for that in the future.
Dr. Henry seemed prepared on Thursday that the government would not be receptive to her approach to safe supply. She told reporters it's her role to provide the best advice on health issues, regardless of who is in political power. Katie DeRosa, CBC News, Victoria.
It has been a deadly week on roads throughout BC. 5 crashes in the past 7 days have now killed 16 people. Near Karameas in the Okanagan, police say 4 family members died in one car crash on Wednesday morning. I should say 2 cars and a tractor-trailer were involved on Highway 3. The family was in one car. The road was closed for up to several hours. It's not yet clear what led to that crash. And just a few hours ago, police announced 2 people have been killed in a collision near Boston Bar on Highway 1. Drive BC says that stretch is still closed in both directions as police try to figure out what caused that crash. And these are the diversions on Highway 99 near King George Boulevard in South Surrey earlier this morning. Police say a 20-year-old woman died in an overnight crash. She was ejected from the car. The driver and another passenger were taken to hospital. Police believe speed may have played a role. Traffic was disrupted for several hours. A milestone has now been reached in the modernization of a massive, decades-old cross-border treaty. The Canadian and U.S. governments have finally reached an agreement in principle on the Columbia River Treaty. The update has taken years. And as Corey Bullock explains, people affected now want to know more details.
But yet it's all of this land that's flooded. Some of this land gets flooded from Libby Dam.
It's an important day for Columbia River Treaty stakeholders. An agreement in principle has been signed that will help negotiations move forward.
This is a roadmap for our team to move forward and also to look to those next steps.
The treaty was originally signed in 1964. It outlines control of the giant river's water flow and the benefits that come from the production of its hydroelectric power on both sides of the border. It's taken 6 years to come to this agreement.
It's quite a day. It's a big step forward.
He says the agreement in principle outlines the compensation package for Indigenous nations, along with provisions for the forming of a joint ecological body. It also marks the beginning of a public consultation and information period for Columbia Basin residents.
I mean, negotiations have been going on for 8 years. I mean, discussions with the community started in 2012. From the entire basin community. So it's been an ongoing process. And as a lifelong resident, I've been here since I was a little kid and saw what happened, the impacts of the treaty when we first moved here and what happened. It's a good thing.
Most salmon runs on the Columbia River system have either declined steadily or have completely disappeared.
The Columbia River is a vast water body shared by many, but divided by borders and politics. It has long been a source for money, power, and life. And Casimir says it's important to remember the history.
The conversion of the Upper Columbia watershed into a massive reservoir system devastated innumerable plant and animal species, as well as our ancestral burial and cultural sites.
With the dams providing flood control, it also changed the landscape of farmland in places like Arrow Lakes.
None of these things actually were considered when the treaty was signed in the 60s. It was just about power generation and flood control, and that's it. You know, none of these other things were taken into consideration. Like, there's nothing about climate change and having the ability to adapt to future unknowns, things like drought.
But she says that will all change once the treaty is officially signed. And Conroy expects the ink to dry within the next year or so. Corey Bullock, CBC News, Cranbrook.
The BC government is warning our province is heading into a potentially lethal wildfire season. A heat wave has been drying out forest fuels, and wildfire danger levels are rising in many areas. As Tom Popick explains, a surge in new blazes is now threatening at least one community in the interior.
Wildfire smoke rising within distance of Kelowna and water bombers flying overhead to attack an overnight blaze burning near Peachland. Signs this interior wildfire season is just now heating up.
We are forecasting and anticipating the potential for a drastically accelerated situation here.
BC Emergency Management Minister Bowen Ma holding a wildfire update, reporting more than 150 active wildfires are now burning throughout the province. Some 40 started in just the past 48 hours after more than 13,000 lightning strikes swept through the Cariboo and north.
Every fire has the potential to be a concern if we don't get on it right away. And so we continue to surge aggressive initial attack to any new start.
Crews rushed to 33 new fires near Wells, BC, in the interior near Barkerville. An evacuation alert has been issued to some 200 people in the area. No residences are included in a mandatory evacuation order. Resident and volunteer firefighter Joey Only is standing by.
We are a small community that has only several road options, to get in and out. It's important that people who want to come out to vacation realize that there is a bit of a situation going on here nonetheless.
The BC Wildfire Service is now requesting out-of-province help. 180 firefighters, specialists, and bucketing aircraft to aid the full complement of 2,000 BCWS firefighters now on duty.
By being proactive in our request for additional resources, we can ensure that that lag that it often takes for additional resources to come in from out of province doesn't impact our ability to protect communities and protect British Columbians.
As temperatures continue to dry forest fuels and grassland, wildfire danger readings are rising. Communities like Vernon are now posting the hazard at extreme.
We did not see any rain, and we do not anticipate any rain anywhere else in BC for the next 10 days.
This Okanagan fire held, but a fire forecast likely to bring more smoke on the horizon. Tom Popick, CBC News, Kelowna.
Let's bring in our wildfire specialist and weather specialist and scientist, Darius Mahdavi, now with get a look at the wildfire risk province-wide. But you have an update on the fire in Wells.
Yes, I wanted to show this map because it has the evacuation order as well as the alert. But this has actually since expanded in just the last hour. Didn't have time to get a graphic made, but now covers this area around the order as well. So be aware of that. Check out the BC Wildfire dashboard. You can see exactly where that new evacuation alert covers. We also have another evacuation alert up here just south of Dawson Creek because of another fire that was growing. Its activity calmed down a little bit yesterday, but now because we saw those winds blow through, activity has spiked a little bit, but so far no escalation to an order or anything like that. And down by Peachland, we also have that fire 5 kilometers west of the town. That is of concern, not a wildfire of note as of yet, but they're expecting some of that wildfire activity to spike around now because of those high temperatures and the possibility of some winds that could be blowing. So keeping an eye on that because the wildfire danger is so high, it's going to be very easy to see very elevated wildfire activity throughout the south. And even though we've come down to moderate fire danger in the north, over the next couple of days, we're going to see more. We're going to see temperatures start to come back up and some drier conditions. So we could see this return to a high to extreme fire danger fairly quickly. In addition, we got those new fire starts because of that lightning activity that passed through. So something else to keep an eye on. Now, as this ridge of high pressure starts to break down and retreat a little bit, it'll still have its influence, so we're still going to be hot and dry in the south, but we're losing that suppressive effect where it stops that lightning from forming, and so those storms from forming that bring lightning. So we're going to see the potential for some more fire starts, especially tomorrow in the southern interior, parts of the Okanagan, central and northern Okanagan, and the Thompson, especially places we're going to be looking out for that lightning tomorrow. Now, we still have those heat warnings in the south, so again, drying out, getting hotter. Fortunately, that storm has since passed away from the north, so a bit of good news there. And so now we just wait and see for what the Wildfire Service finds in terms of any new fire starts that came up there. We should have a better picture of that tomorrow.
Okay. Thanks very much, Darius.
Thank you.
Well, did you feel any of them? In the last week, BC has seen 12 earthquakes off the west coast of Vancouver Island. As Michelle Gomez explains, 4 tremors happened this morning, one with a magnitude of 6.4.
Some Vancouver Island residents reported feeling an earthquake Thursday morning. It happened just after 8 a.m. about 180 kilometers west of Port Alice and measured at a magnitude of 6.4. It's one of a dozen earthquakes that have been detected in BC water since the start of July, ranging between 3.9 and 6. Earthquakes Canada says a swarm of earthquakes like what we are currently seeing is not unusual in this area and happens about once a year. It says earthquakes are expected over the next few weeks, but none should exceed the 6.4 on Thursday morning.
We're not concerned, but we are always monitoring this area because it is an area of very active seismicity. These events are far enough offshore that the shaking from these events are not expected to cause any damage.
Paul says people should have an emergency kit ready in their homes, and in the case of a more serious quake, be prepared to drop, cover, and hold on. Michelle Gomez, CBC News, Vancouver.
Several weeks have now passed since children under 18 and people living with disabilities have been able to get dental care under the new federal plan. That's meant 1.2 million more Canadians are now able to get dental care. Seniors 70 years and older started receiving coverage on May 1st, when applications also opened up for those 65 to 69. The massive public oral health care insurance scheme will eventually cover 1/4 of Canadians who don't have private dental plans. It's set to cost $13 billion over the next 5 years. We asked patients and providers in Victoria what they think of the new plan.
It will make a huge difference to both patients that haven't had insurance at all and to us because the fee guide is different. So we've been using, for patients that have this type of insurance, ministry fee guide, and this federal fee guide, which is new, will pay significantly more.
I was raving about it, and people said, well, oh, gee, yeah, I got that notice and I didn't do anything. I said, get on it right away.
Canadians age 18 to 64 will be allowed to apply for the federal program next January. There are more calls for increased accountability at Metro Vancouver. 7 city councillors from across the Lower Mainland say the regional authority needs greater oversight, and they're hoping BC's Auditor General will step in. As Michelle Gassoub explains, they join a slew of other politicians asking for more supervision.
The North Shore wastewater treatment plant hasn't gone to plan. Its cost has spiraled from $700 million to $3.86 billion. Its completion date pushed from 2020 to 2030. Now, 7 city councillors from 5 municipalities are calling on BC's Auditor General to investigate.
Focusing specifically on the North Shore project, where we've seen costs ballooning above and beyond anything else that we've seen.
The councillors have 3 calls to action for Premier David Eby, an independent governance review of Metro Vancouver, putting recommendations on the ballot during the next municipal elections, and a public inquiry from the Auditor General into cost overruns at the North Shore plant.
I think the Premier needs to call for an independent audit. My preference would be an Auditor General, but someone to come in that is independent and explain where all these cost overruns are coming and put some good financial controls in place at Metro.
Metro Vancouver did not respond to a request for comment, but said last month it would launch an independent review into the cost. Meanwhile, BC's Auditor General told CBC News it operates independently of the province and said its mandate does not include local government matters.
Not only am I hoping for accountability on this particular project, I'm hoping that this project and the accountability mechanisms that will result from the lessons learned of this project will then come into play for future projects where we don't have to go through this again, be it in the form of delay or in the form of excessive costs that are being levied onto our taxpayers.
To cover the cost of the plant, North Shore households will pay $590 a year for 30 years. The rest of the cost will be absorbed by other taxpayers across Metro Vancouver. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
The world's largest Highland dance competition is wrapping up today in Kamloops. Close to 700 dancers from across the country are competing against each other, as well as athletes from Scotland, the U.S., New Zealand, Ireland, and Australia. Our Shelley Joyce dropped by the Sandman Centre to see some of the best performers.
When most people think of Highland dancing, they may not imagine the grueling workouts, the constant training, the serious skill, athleticism, and creative movement that this sport requires.
For this competition, the nerves are really high because this is the biggest one in Canada. And so a lot of people, this is their biggest competition they do.
About 2 minutes, we are dancing nonstop without stopping for breaks.
My mom, my aunt, and my grandma were all dancers. The top 3 in each age group get to dance here. So it's really an honor to dance here.
It's pretty hardcore. It's like you lose your breath. You have to do such hard skills while smiling and looking like it's super easy.
This is our biggest event in Canada. It happens once a year, every July, to feature our Canadian top dancers.
The competitors range in age from 6 to 21 plus. These kids from Calgary are here to appreciate the older dancers and to get a feel for the room.
My mom used to do dancing. Exciting and nervous.
What do you get out of dancing?
Medals, like proud kind of, to watch the big dancers.
We're here to share in the excitement of this Canadian competition. The girls have come to see the big girls compete and also to be part of this great community of Highland dancing. I think that the team environment, working with a school, having lots of peers that are doing the same thing, all here for the same goal, to cheer each other on, to do our best to improve ourselves, and yeah, just really to be a community together.
Shelley Joyce, CBC News, Kamloops.
Vancouver para-surfer Victoria Feige is trying to convince officials that para-surfing belongs at the Paralympics in 2028.
we met all of the criteria, and behind the scenes people were saying because surfing is the state sport of California and California is excited about it and surfing's in the Olympics and we've got the sport of pro surfers, all signs seem to point to yes. So we were pretty shocked and devastated when the reason given was cost and complexity.
Feige's got both the greatest surfer of all time, Kelly Slater, and two-time Grammy winner and former pro surfer Jack Johnson supporting her cause. A petition started by American parasurfer Josh Bogle, which just crossed 10,000 signatures and counting, I should say. Surfing debuted at the 2020 Olympics in Japan as it is included in Paris this summer. Parasurfing is yet to make the Paralympic Games roster. BC's craft beer industry has brewed up quite a fan base. After the break, though, we're going to dive into the challenges brewers have always faced. You'll want to stick around for this. It is Throwback Thursday, and that means it's time to dive into our vast CBC archives. Today, BC is home to over 200 breweries. But decades ago, Canada's beer industry was dominated by the giants, Carling, O'Keeffe, Labatt, and Molson. But with many tired of frequent strikes at the Big Three, the landscape started changing in 1982 when the first microbrewery emerged. Today, we revisit a story from 1989 and look at the challenges the pioneers of the craft beer industry faced back then.
Here in the heart of Vancouver's East Side Warehouse District, the Shaftesbury Brewing Company is pumping out 600 kegs of beer a month. One look, and you know this isn't Labatt's or Molson's.
Myself and my partner Tim thought it was a pretty good idea. We're both beer drinkers, no doubt about that. We felt we could probably make a few dollars at it if we played the cards right.
It's been 2 years since Beaton and his partner set up shop. After getting startup money from the British Columbia Enterprise Corporation, they joined the ranks of the growing cottage brewing industry. And with a staff of only 6, Beaton does everything from brewing the beer to balancing the books.
I'm certainly no genius. I'm just a regular guy off the street. I think we just had a fair bit of smarts, and we just had the guts, I think, to go out and give it a try.
The microbrewing process is different from mass-produced beer. It's aged twice as long and has a heavier, fuller taste because of a higher proportion of malt. There is also no pasteurization process, which means a shorter shelf life. All of this, combined with a very tight market, means it's hard to make a buck at microbrewing. There are those in the industry who say that the microbreweries are really doomed and that only 1 or 2 of the larger ones can really survive.
I think, unfortunately, there has been a few that have failed in the past. What we did differently, I think, than the others is we put a priority on quality control. Instead of just trying to crank out beer, we decided we're going to make a great product. We don't have to sell a lot of beer. As long as we sell a good amount and it's good product, we will stay in business.
But not every microbrewery is a success story. This used to be the home of the Canadian Heritage Brewing Company in Steveston. Production was halted last month when the company couldn't pay off a $200,000 bank loan. Canadian Heritage is now up for sale. Industry insiders say lack of money is usually the reason microbreweries fail. Nobody knows this better than Mitchell Taylor, the founder of BC's oldest cottage brewery, the Granville Island Brewing Company.
We lost money every year. It's very difficult to continue producing a premium beer using all expensive ingredients and low unit cost or low volumes. We have been able to maintain the quality, and the only thing we haven't been able to do is make money. Now, I think we can change that.
After losing money for 5 years, Granville Island was taken over by the International Potter Distilling Corporation last March. Taylor's hoping that Potter's distribution network will finally turn Granville Island into a moneymaker. And Taylor's advice for budding beer makers?
That's a very easy question to answer. You have lots of money. Think of all you need and then double or triple it, and you still probably need more.
Microbreweries may just be a blip in the national beer market, but even though beer drinking is declining in Canada, cottage breweries are selling 6 times the suds they were 5 years ago. Elliot Schiff, CBC News, Vancouver.
Now, to talk about what the craft beer industry looks like in BC, now we're joined by Joe Wiebe, beer expert and author of Craft Beer Revolution, The Insider's Guide to BC Breweries. Joe, thanks for being here. In that story we just saw from 1989, it was mentioned beer consumption was dropping. Do you think that still rings true?
Well, it's hard to know. I mean, lots and lots of breweries have opened since then in BC, so obviously people still like to drink beer. I mean, I've heard in recent years, since the pandemic and since a lot of health news came out the last couple of years about alcohol consumption, that breweries are noticing a decrease in consumption rates among their customers and are adjusting their tactics, brewing non-alcoholic beers and things like that. But certainly lots and lots of people still love drinking great, craft beer from BC producers, for sure.
What do you think fueled the success before we saw some of the challenges with the pandemic of the beer industry here, particularly the micro beers, the independent operators?
Well, there's so many factors. There's so much creativity among the breweries, the amazing styles of beer they come up with, the quality of the products, and the tasting rooms, like a lot of the breweries that opened in the last decade have benefited from these tasting rooms as their main focus, right? And that's a rule change that happened in about 12 years ago. That if you look back at that clip, those breweries back then didn't have that opportunity to have a tasting room where they could sell their own beer by the glass and things like that. And that's really essentially the main thing that fueled the huge boom in new breweries that has happened over the last dozen years or so, for sure.
And yet we've also seen a number of local breweries closing down or being sold for all sorts of reasons, be it high rent, be it challenges from the pandemic. What other challenges are craft brewers in BC facing right now?
Yeah, it's a tough market right now for sure, with with a combination of the economic challenges, the downturn, the fact that we all face it in our household budgets. Imagine what breweries are facing as inflation increases the cost of their ingredients and the cost of labor and all the rest of it, combined with people maybe being a little more penny pinching, a little more cost conscious, so maybe not necessarily spending as much on luxury items like a quality craft beer. So breweries are having to deal with they can't necessarily raise their prices to pay for the cost of the ingredients and the rest of it, but they have to figure out a way to make it work still. So lots of breweries are still doing that and are still really working hard with the local communities and staying successful for sure.
And lastly, we appreciate your time. Where do you see the industry heading in the future, if you could crystal ball it?
Well, it's going to take a little while to work through this time right now. It's a little challenging, I think, with the way the economy is and so on. But there's been stability in the industry for a long time. The growth curve has been pretty constant for the last 30, 40 years. So I think it's going to continue to grow and to prosper. I think a lot of people really love their quality BC craft beer and are still happy and look for those products on local shelves and at breweries in their neighborhoods and towns and so on.
Joe Wiebe, beer expert and author of Craft Beer Revolution, The Insider's Guide to BC Breweries. Thanks for your time and your expertise.
Cheers. Thank you.
Still to come, we'll tell you why the federal opposition leader got a mixed reception at the Assembly of First Nations today. That story's next. Tonight, Joe Biden faced his doubters and a room full of journalists. Many call it a make-or-break moment for the president's presidential campaign after his disastrous performance 2 weeks ago on the debate stage. Since then, a rolling tide of Democrats has called for him to drop out. Katie Simpson has the latest from Washington.
A country waiting on pins and needles. U.S. President Joe Biden finally emerged for one of the greatest tests of his political life.
I'm not in this for my legacy. I'm in this to complete the job I started.
He defended his decision to stay in the presidential race, denying he's limited by his age or health.
So if I slow down, I can't get the job done. That's a sign that I shouldn't be doing it. But there's no indication of that yet. None.
Biden described his debate performance, where he looked confused and lost his train of thought, as being a stupid mistake, blaming exhaustion. There were signs of trouble at this appearance, though, calling his vice president, Kamala Harris, Donald Trump.
I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be vice president, but I think she was not qualified to be president. So let's start there.
Biden had a similar flub earlier in the day while introducing Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky.
Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. President Putin. We're going to beat President Putin. President Zelensky. I'm so focused on beating Putin, we got to worry about it. Anyway, Mr. President.
I'm better.
You are a hell of a lot better.
The moment catching world leaders off guard who appeared shocked. Calls for Biden to pass the torch have intensified as he's failed to convince some Democrats he's capable of both beating Donald Trump and serving a second term.
Because you can't undo the debate, and you can't undo the response that came after the debate.
Biden's campaign team is being accused of hiding his decline, an allegation that was reportedly made during a tense meeting with Democratic senators. Biden's team has now reportedly ordered polls to see whether Vice President Kamala Harris has a better shot at beating Trump. For now, she remains publicly supportive of her boss.
And the past few days have been a reminder that running for president of the United States is never easy, nor should it be. But one thing we know about our president, Joe Biden, is that he is a fighter.
For now, Biden is determined to fight, saying there's only one scenario where he'd reconsider.
No, unless they came back and said, there's no way you can win. Me. No one's saying that. No poll says that. Okay.
Katie Simpson reporting from Washington. To Montreal now, where the federal opposition leaders addressed the Assembly of First Nations today. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre got a mixed reaction in his first in-person appearance at that event, while NDP leader Jagmeet Singh made his pitch for further reconciliation. And as Olivia Stefanovich explains, the Liberal government was also there to unveil a major funding deal.
For both the Conservative leader and First Nations chiefs, a significant moment.
This is my first meeting with you in person, but I hope it will be the first of many.
A chance for Pierre Poilievre to reset the tone with the Assembly of First Nations, a relationship that's faced challenges.
If reconciliation means anything, it means saying yes to economic opportunities that First Nations are asking for.
Some delegates turned their backs, a silent protest involving veterans, members of the LGBTQ and Two-Spirit community.
I'm trying not to cry right now, but standing up there for all of my Two-Spirit people, that it was just something that I had to do.
In your speech, you did not acknowledge missing murdered women.
Poilievre was also called out for what he didn't say.
I did not hear anything about the climate crisis, climate change issues. There's a hurricane in the town right now from the remnants from Burrell. How can we dismiss climate crisis?
But the message Poilievre came to deliver, one focused on resource and economic development, welcomed by others.
And I'm pretty certain he will form government according to the polls. And we wish him well, and we want to work with him and start building those relationships now to make sure that we get some good things going for First Nations people in this country.
And Poilievre wasn't the only political leader vying for approval.
Economic reconciliation cannot happen unless
It means respecting your rights to free, informed prior consent.
Singh tried to counter the conservative message. So did the Indigenous Services Minister, who arrived on the last day of AFN meetings for a sudden press conference.
We are pleased to announce that we have secured a commitment from the Government of Canada to provide $47.8 billion in funding over 10 years.
That money aimed at solving one of the biggest outstanding issues between the government and First Nations, child welfare reform. The government hoping the dollar figure will trump any promises Poilievre and Singh try to make. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Montreal.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Canada expects to reach NATO's defense spending target of 2% of GDP in 2032. Trudeau made that announcement today in Washington on the final day of the NATO Leaders Summit.
We have shown that a responsible government steps up in a changing world and does the necessary work, not just to increase defense spending, but to do it in the right way.
Canada has been under pressure from allies to produce a plan to hit the military alliance's spending benchmark. While Canada has boosted defense spending by 57% over the last 10 years, it still lags behind some of its allies. Also at the summit, Canada signed a new deal with the U.S. and Finland to build up to 90 polar icebreakers to expand NATO access to the Arctic and help deter Russian and Chinese ambitions in the far north. The RCMP has launched a new campaign to raise awareness about what it calls foreign interference activities committed by China. As Douglas Gallivan reports, the Mounties say there's been a spike in complaints over the last month.
With boots on the ground, the RCMP is hoping this awareness campaign comes across as a show of support. They want anyone who has been threatened or harassed by the People's Republic of China to feel comfortable coming forward.
It could be anything. It could be someone threatening you if you don't remove a social media post. It could be someone threatening you to go back to China to settle some outstanding debt or issues. Otherwise, they're going to threaten or harm your family over there.
The RCMP says it's been aware for some time that China is exerting influence over people in Canada. In March last year, it revealed that two community groups, one in Chinatown and one in Brossard, were under investigation for allegedly hosting secret Chinese government police stations. It accused them of acting as hubs to harass and intimidate members of the Chinese community in Canada. The groups deny the allegations and are suing for damages.
The investigation has had a chilling effect on the community. People prevented themselves from reaching out to get help at our community centers because of the allegations of the RCMP.
But the RCMP says the threats and harassment continue. In the past few weeks alone, it says it's received about half a dozen credible complaints.
It's obviously intolerable for us to let it go.
The campaign also includes this social media video. Community leaders say they encourage anyone who is being harassed by the Chinese government to come forward, but add that it could be an uphill battle.
Chinese community is not a homogenous community. So there are people who do trust the police implicitly. I don't trust the RCMP. They just threw us into the public and say, hey, these are Chinese police stations, and then gave no other information to support their allegations.
The RCMP says that the investigation into these secret Chinese government police stations is ongoing, but can't say if it will lead to criminal charges because sometimes in cases of foreign actor interference, criminal charges just aren't possible. It says that it might have to resort to disruption methods, but adds that they're not at that point yet. Douglas Gallivan, CBC News, Montreal.
A restaurant was left holding the bill for a big seafood dinner after the family diners reportedly dashed. Now, the owners fought back and got their bill settled. Next.
So I know when I really like a song, if within the first 3 seconds, I'm already vibing to it.
Hey, I'm Rohith Joseph. Vibin' is the new show all about discovering great new songs and fresh artists from across BC and beyond.
It's not one person dictating what good music is, it's the community sharing what good music is.
Stream Vibin' on CBC Listen.
A Charlottetown restaurant owner is crediting the public and the power of social media for helping her track down a family who, it appears, dined and dashed. The group visiting the island spent nearly $200 Monday night, then took off. Steve Bruce tells us what happened next.
This is the typical scene at Lobster on the Wharf. Diners are ordering, eating, and most importantly, paying. That's not the way it played out at one table Monday evening. A family ordered lobsters, oysters, and drinks, and then took off before getting their $170 bill.
Well, it's really disheartening, and I talked to the server, and he was totally shocked. He said it was a mom and dad and 2 little kids. He said, I never would have thought.
Lisa Gale says it happens a few times a year here. In the past, the diners and dashers were never caught, but Monday night, staff tracked down security camera footage of the family leaving. Gale posted it to the restaurant's Facebook page. She says 600 people shared it, 60,000 viewed it. The calls started coming in.
Had great response. We had so many phone calls yesterday that it ended up leading to actually a phone number for the visitors to the island. And when I reached out to them to ask, why you left and didn't pay your bill, they were more concerned with their pictures on social media. So I agreed if they sent me the money and paid for the meal that I would take the pictures down.
This morning, she got an e-transfer for $170 and took down the post.
Well, I think it kind of turned into a good story with all the help from all the good citizens and the people looking at the posts, and I can't thank them enough for helping. I never thought in a million years we would recover that money.
It's kind of a element.
The Atlantic rep for Restaurants Canada says it shouldn't come to that. Thankfully, he says dining and dashing is rare, but when it happens, it hurts, especially now with many restaurants struggling with rising costs and fewer customers.
Well, the odd $100 or $200 bill in some cases might be what a restaurant's margin is for that day. Most of these independents are dealing with pretty slim margins, so a couple of $100, it may not seem like a lot to some people, but it is a lot to someone who's trying to eke out a living with a low-margin business.
Charlottetown police said today restaurants should report diners and dashers. It is a criminal offense that can lead to charges. In this case, Lobster on the Wharf's owner says she's just happy to have her bill paid and a story to tell that she hopes sends a message.
There's cameras everywhere now, and people have to know that if you go out and eat or if you go out and break the law, then you're going to get caught.
Steve Bruce, CBC News, Charlottetown.
Darius Mandavi joins us with a province-wide forecast. Good day to be outside in some areas if you want to be out in the Wharf having some seafood. But what's the situation now?
Well, you're right. Beautiful day for people in the south, albeit still, of course, hot in the interior. Even though heat warnings have dropped on parts of the island, temperature's still going to be around 30 degrees with the humidex over the next, 30 with the humidex, 27 degrees, 30 with the humidex, no degrees for saying humidex, my bad. Tomorrow and over the weekend, so be ready for that because those are still high temperatures. In the interior, still hitting the mid to high 30s, so also there, be on the lookout. But the big story is going to be the rain that has come to the north. You can see green is around 10 millimeters at most. This orange and yellow is around 25 millimeters at most. So some rainfall came, but this is from 5 a.m. Yesterday to 5 a.m. this morning. The next analysis doesn't come out until tomorrow morning, so we'll take a look at that tomorrow as well. But generally speaking, a little bit more rain came to the northeast, but not too much more, and there were a decent number of lightning strikes. So keep a look at in that area on the wildfire dashboard over the next couple days to see what new lightning starts there may have been. And remember that that rain did help. You can see what matches up pretty well with where we saw that precipitation, where we've seen that fire danger come down. Just depends how quickly those temperatures rebound, which may be pretty fast, and whether we see that next front roll in. At the moment, it looks like sort of Saturday night into Sunday, we may see some more precipitation come to the north, which would be good news once again for that area. You can see that here, that precipitation that may or may not roll in. Generally speaking, not too much action happening for the southern interior, although we do have that risk of convection tonight and into tomorrow, or mostly tomorrow. It's looking like the risk will be mostly in the Okanagan and the Thompson, although there is a slight risk in the Caribou as well. So those are the areas we'll be watching out for. Actually, I want to mention also here on the coast, at least, we're going to see some outflow winds. Oh my goodness, jumping all over the place. Outflow winds that may bring some warmer temperatures into tomorrow. But then when they switch to inflow winds, a little bit more humidity from that air blowing in off the strait. In terms of the highs that we're going to see over the next few days, generally staying pretty consistent here on the coast, but the interior sees a fluctuation of a few degrees, but still well above seasonal in many areas, anywhere from 8 to 10 degrees above seasonal. In terms of conditions across the province, though, we're looking at still lots of sunshine, but again, looking at that risk of convection in some parts of the interior, and the slightest risk of some lightning activity happening in Whistler as well, although I wouldn't count on it, but it is a slight possibility. And here, Dan, same forecast as always, just sunny.
Okay. Thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
A potentially awkward discussion. Who pays on a first date? After the break, we find out how some people in Vancouver handle it.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
CBC returns as a media partner of the Surrey Fusion Festival, July 20th to the 21st. The festival features over 50 cultural pavilions that will incorporate the theme of landmarks of the world into their displays. For more information, visit surreyfusionfestival.ca. And never miss a special programming series, event, or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter and keep connected with us.
It's a debate as old as time, apparently. Who pays for the first date?
Our Missy Johnson hit the streets to find out how some Vancouverites foot the bill when they're dating.
Who pays on the first date?
The man, always.
The man.
Yes.
Why? It's just gentleman-like, yeah. It's the first date. Who's paying?
I'll pay the first few dates.
Yeah?
And then I think after that, like if you can go 50-50, that's ideal.
That's a good question. I feel like I'm always prepared to pay, but I mean, if you want to pay, I'm not going to say no, but I'm always prepared to pay for myself.
Yeah, honestly, I'd say the same. If someone invites me out and I say yes, I'm going under the assumption that I'm going to be paying. First date, last date, whatever it is. So I always assume to pay.
Well, we live in one of the most expensive cities, so I think it's fair to split the bill, and that's fine.
I think we split ours.
Yeah.
We did.
Yeah, we did. May I ask how you decided to do that?
We were getting drinks at a bar, and I think, oh no, I paid.
You did?
Yeah, but she got the next one.
Yeah.
Date 2, she paid.
Cool, you know? Yeah, don't want to expect anything. Who pays when you go out on a date?
Split. Yeah, split
Always.
it. I agree. Yeah, at least on the first date.
I guess even in Germany, it's usually him paying for the first date.
Yeah, you paid for our first date, that's true.
Well.
It would have been me. It was 44 years ago, so, things were a little bit different then.
No, really?
I would say if I'm asking you on the first date, then I would pay first. But
Okay.
if you ask me out and you want to treat me, I wouldn't say no to that.
Okay, perfect. I'll buy you a popsicle next time. It'll be amazing. I tend to agree. I think first date, I'd be happy to pay. After that, you can go splitsies, but maybe don't divvy up. Some people, they only pay for what they have.
Yeah, itemize it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Don't become an accountant. Just get a calamari.
Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC.
And I will have your next local news at 11 o'clock right after the Nationals. So we'll see you then. Good night.